spotlight on new Documentum features and effective backup and recovery for the Documentum content server. The presentation will be approximately 45 minutes long, followed by a question and answer session. All participant lines will remain mute during this event. To submit a question, please use the questions box on your control panel. You may submit a question at any time, however. It will not be answered until the end of the presentation. And before we begin the presentation, I'm going to quickly run through our agenda. First, Patrick Walsh of EMC, Product Manager for the Documentum platform, will talk about recent updates to the platform, including evolving customer challenges, new Documentum features, and the Documentum content server. Next, Mike Fernandez, Vice President of Products for InChoice, will talk about an effective backup and recovery plan for Documentum. He'll then discuss the need for a comprehensive backup strategy and the false sense of recovery you can get if you only have an enterprise backup system in place. He'll give an overview of CYA software, followed by a customer success story. And lastly, I will review upcoming events, and then we'll go into our Q&A session. Welcome, Patrick. It's all yours.
Thanks, Cheryl. Jumped ahead there. I'm Patrick Walsh. I'm the product manager for the Documentum platform at EMC. I've been with EMC and working with enterprise content management through 16 years here now, and quite some time before that. So I'd like to just run through, as Cheryl said, the latest features in Documentum and really why we're doing this. Our mission at EMC is to provide a world-class global enterprise content management platform for all your content solutions. We want to continue to be the single trusted home for your most valuable information in your enterprise. We know many of our customers, everybody, has growing amounts of information. The cost associated with keeping all of that at your fingertips can get quite high. We want to focus in on the most valuable information, keep that safe and secure across your enterprise, make sure that Documentum is your archive repository for all your information for your business needs there. Not only that, we want to make sure that we are preparing the information to be consumed in the proper manner, to build value around that information to help your business actually thrive and be more productive by knowing what information is within the Documentum repository. Taking both those into account, the safety and security of the information and the knowledge that Documentum has by interpreting that information and giving it to your end users when they need it, will make everybody more productive and make that information more valuable. This year, Documentum turned 25 years old. So it's a very good testament from the original architects, all the technical leads and engineers and support staff that have come after them in the last 25 years, that Documentum is still maintained, it's still modern, it's still contemporary, and it's still the best place to store your important information. We do see evolving customer challenges from the days of the client-server architecture 25 years ago to the modern day. We basically see requirements and challenges coming from 3 different areas within our install base and within the market. First and foremost is the business need to be competitive, to be agile, to be able to deliver new solutions to market as quickly and as fast as possible, whether that's gathering that information, storing it, maintaining it, interacting with other customers from the business standpoint. You need to have your information and content management solutions deployed as quickly as you can think of them. We also have the new end users who are very experienced in technology. They know what is available in the marketplace. They're all internet savvy. They all have various means of communicating. We want those end users to be satisfied with the solutions that they're provided. They want to be able to access information from anywhere. They want to be able to communicate at the speed of light and not have to worry about anything slowing them down at all. And they're quite readily and at the drop of a credit card number able to find alternative solutions for what they want to do today. And that brings us to the bottom point there is IT control and efficiencies of the solutions from a technical standpoint. We want to be able to provide the community supporting Documentum solutions with the needs to be able to have longevity of a solution, to be able to make sure the content is safe and secure, and that they support the business and the users to the level of commitment that they require. There's certain SLAs, there's various different needs to move information across the globe, to protect it wherever it is, and to make sure that that is accessible in a timely manner. A lot of that has to do with what you keep, how you consider a high value asset versus information you may not need, the compliance of that content, and the need to have it around for as long as you need it. So the Documentum platform is our response to those challenges. It's a broad set of platform services upon which at EMC we build a number of solutions, some generic like XEP and D2, WebTop and other applications that provide access to your information, whether it is a library use case, a transactional use case, or other use cases around handling that information. We also have more productive solution approaches to provide even tighter integration with the end user, with the end market of where that solution will be exposed as well within our value office solutions focused within EMC and life sciences, energy and engineering, and healthcare. And we have a very broad developer and partner community that uses our open APIs to access Documentum to produce a number of other solutions to integrate Documentum into other services and make sure the information of their clients are safe going forward into the future. So today in the roadmap, I'm going to touch a little bit upon D2 and XEP, what's there right now as new features, so you get a little baseline of what the version number is, what the products can do, and what's been updated lately. Focus a little bit more time on the Documentum platform services, content server, some of the trusted content services, and other capabilities that we've updated recently as well. So D2, for those who are not familiar with D2, our D2 client application is an advanced, configurable, very configurable, highly configurable, content-centric application that allows access to Documentum. It provides an intuitive and personalized interface capabilities to allow users to who have different work styles, basically, to interact with Documentum and have a compliant nature around the content using various different organizational policies and standards, and that helps is a benefit over previous applications that we've had that are much more solution focused. What you have is what you get. You may be able to turn off some features, but D2 is built from the ground up with a very agile experience in mind. The D2 application makes the knowledge worker more productive. It provides them the information they need as they seem to need it. It reduces training costs because the users get to manipulate the content. You can modify it for an organization, then the user has the complete control of their workspace. And this accelerates adoption and ease of content management within an organization. No longer is it a pain to have to save a document into a repository. It's actually part of the workflow process, and you can do a lot with D2 application above and beyond just access to Documentum. The 4.5 release came out in April of this year. The focus was on productivity, information integrity, and agility. For productivity, there were a good number of enhancements. Here we are trying to make sure that the end user gets to feel more as part of the content management experience and not just somebody who's watching the screens. We have enhanced the faceted navigation. We have multi-document support in workflows, the ability to interact with multiple repositories at the same time, enhanced review and annotation capabilities, stronger distributed content capabilities to help support remote users and their access to the information. We have enhanced the user experience and their interaction from their desktop and their mobile devices in order to drag and drop from the desktop to D2. We're focused more on how users interact with their environment using D2, so out of office delegation is now part of the 4.5 release. Information integrity really makes sure that the information you're putting into D2 is safe and secure. So not only is it safe at the platform level, we want to make sure that the applications adhere to the same rules, that any interaction from D2 to the Documentum platform or from D2 to the end users are also safe and secure. With the 4.5 release, there's additional single sign-on providers integrated. We have publish and revise policies included in D2 now that help with the integration with Simplicity file sync and share deployments. One of the things I personally like for 4.5 is the deep folder import. No longer do you have to import one folder or one document at a time. You can point to one place and it'll all get uploaded through D2, which is a great time saver. There's virtual document and intelligent URL capabilities. The cool thing with intelligent URLs is, if you're familiar with the Documentum resource locator, the DRLs, very similar concept. However, the intelligent URLs understand what that link is supposed to do, whether it's supposed to view, whether it's supposed to download, whether it's supposed to open up a workflow by clicking on that URL. So it's a very, with a click of a link, you're right into D2, right where you need to be, and it saves a lot of time trying to figure out where and when to go to things. And agility. Really, we want to make sure that D2 is fitting in with your organization. And here we have very specific user settings, reports, and configuration utilities to help it do so. With XEP, we, well, for those who may not be familiar with the XEP, it's our rapid application development platform based on composable widgets. You can quickly and cost-effectively compose applications, expose and exploit the full value of your information to provide the views that a user needs at a specific point in time within an activity, a transaction, or a workflow. And when you provide this content in context, you make your end users much more efficient, and they're very quickly and easily set up. You can do proof of concepts with the designer tools, grab widgets, create new models, new behaviors upon those as well. It's really cool. In the two release that came out, we focus on designer performance. The designer tools are now 64-bit. It allows you to create much bigger applications. Deploying applications from XEP to your end users is much more efficient. They're optimized operations across its tool set. So deploying things can be up to 60 times more efficient. So from where the developer goes to when an end user gets to see the application, it's much faster, much more efficient. The designer tools, many more widgets, a lot easier to use. We have enhanced runtime capabilities. The widgets make more sense to the end user. We have great efficiencies there for them, from dragging and dropping to hit count displays to dynamically hiding columns. Tons of great stuff. So Documentum 7 platform, it is the trusted home for your information. For Documentum is the place to put it. With Documentum 7.x, we've had 3 releases so far of the Documentum 7 code line. We focused on 4 primary investment themes. Reduced total cost of ownership, making Documentum a lot easier to deploy, administrate, and keep up and running. We know that managing an ECM is not our customers' main focus of their business. We want to help support the business going forward, your business going forward. And we're making Documentum less costly to run. Trust and security. Every release of Documentum is thoroughly vetted through a number of security regression testing suites. We're making sure that we keep up with all the evolving threats out there in the world. Documentum has never been breached for its information. We're going to keep it that way. There's a number of things we've done in the last 3 releases, and right now Documentum 7.2 is the most secured version of Documentum ever. And performance and scalability. We've managed to accelerate our session management to a point where you can get up to 8 times faster, or up to 8 times more users per connection to Documentum by multi-pooling the actual session count as well. So it's great from the application down to the Documentum, the content server to the content server to the database. All those connections are now optimized for packing the most number of users through that, most number of user sessions. And that means you can support more users with the same infrastructure. And manageability. We're obviously looking at making sure Documentum is easy to manage, that you can administrate it, and that there's great tools to orchestrate its deployment. We have a broad set of Documentum services and component products, over 20 of them. Obviously don't have enough time to talk about those now in the next few minutes before I turn it over to Mike. However, you know, if you're interested in those, let us know. We can talk about them. But the cool thing is the Documentum platform simultaneously ships over 20 different products that you know interoperate with each other. The latest version of Documentum, the 7.2, to highlight 3 different features that we've included. Security options. Documentum now includes out of the box AES 256-bit encryption options. So You get the top secret level of protection. Is great for long-term archiving from now and insanely into the millennia into the future. We have administrator-proof protection for those keys through some RSA lockbox technology, and we have better compliant storage options for Isilon data domain. Hyperscale storage. With hyperscale storage and Viber integration into Documentum, not only can you connect Documentum to any storage platforms that you're provided by your storage teams into Documentum, but you can also add it to the Elastic Cloud or Isilon from EMC to get basically an infinite number or amount of information under that node, which will be cool. And solution focus, as I said, we're really looking at the value office solutions and how we can create APIs to expose Documentum in the right way and in a modern interface. So that brings us to I think Documentum in general. And at the very heart of Documentum is the Documentum content server. That is what coordinates all the activities throughout the system. It provides a library of services. It provides user authentication. It stores information into its back office infrastructures, and it coordinates the activities of all your global users, of all your most important information, and make sure it's safely secured where it's supposed to be. So as a refresher, behind the Documentum content server, represented there by the Documentum logo, is a relational database where all the metadata and the application logic for all the products are stored. There's some configuration in there. Obviously, workflows, transactional information is also stored within that database. We have the full text index, which is developed through the analysis of our Explorer search engine. So every document that comes into Documentum is analyzed, the index is created for that document, or the content extracted, is added into the indexes, and those indexes can be stored in a single location for Explorer, merged together and optimized per the Explorer configuration. And then we also have our, basically our content stores, where all the files and the information is stored. So all the files that are included through D2 or XCP or any of the other Documentum APIs and clients, all the files are put onto a content store. Those are configurable and pluggable. You have many options to choose from there. I think the big thing to take away, though, is that it's the content server right now that is coordinating all these efforts. There's many different sessions. There's many different threads working on the content. There's out of the, even inside the platform services, there's the 20-odd different components that are working in sync to make sure that content is prepared and stored and archived in the right way. And none of the relational databases, full text index, or content stores know much about each other. They're just where that content is stored there for the safety of Documentum. They protect what they protect, they know what they know, and the content server makes sure that everything works correctly. So my 20 minutes is up, I believe, and I'd like to pass this over now from the Documentum roadmap and update. It was a very quick 20 minutes. There's lots of things inside of Documentum, but I hope that gives you a peek into what's available now, and hopefully you'll be able to take advantage of some of those features in the near future. I'll pass it over to Mike Fernandez. And Mike, good luck with your section here.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you for sharing that information. Very insightful. So we just discussed, and Patrick just really discussed some of the highlights and the solutions that Documentum is providing. Now, what I'm going to focus on is, how to build and protect those solutions. We're going to discuss a little bit about the CYA products, and then we'll discuss a little bit more about some of the challenges of what Patrick just touched on in terms of the content server and kind of keeping synchronization and be able to recover information correctly within those environments. So information or documents is one of the most important assets of an organization, and these documents are used by customers, partners worldwide, and depending on the information and the usage, the service levels with the business, information needs to be available most of the day, if not 24/7. So what this really means is that the IT departments really need to, or the backup teams, need to ensure that Documentum is always available, right? That content server, because that content server is really at the heart of everything that Documentum solutions are built on. This is often referred to in terms of the backup team as a backup window, which is how often do I have to take Documentum offline in order to perform that backup. Of course, maintaining the availability of this system is critical for ensuring that collaboration and access to this information by customers or partners around the world is available at all times. The other part of it is big data, and this is not necessarily just a marketing term. This is really a reality, and there are numerous reports out on the internet. I mean, you do a search just on information growth, and you get tons and tons of information on this. And what I'm showing here is just one report that shows that corporate data is really growing, and it's growing at a tremendous amount of rate. We're showing here, for example, that the volume is increasing from 10.5 zettabytes. We're talking about zettabytes. We're not even at petabytes anymore, but really at zettabytes, from 10.5 from 2.3 in 2015 to 10.5 in 2020. This implies that the velocity, right, that is basically doubling almost every 14 months, right? It's increasing by that much. And this is all, of course, it's not just content managers. This is really just the amount of information worldwide in terms of how it's increasing. And then also, interesting is the amount of sources, right? The amount of information that's being created throughout all these different types of applications, emails. I mean, video, for example, is one that we're starting to see more and more growth as well, and also being introduced now into content management as well. And then, of course, we can't forget about the number of compliance regulations that exist out there, and not only in the U.S. but worldwide. And even if you're just a U.S.-based company, you're likely dealing with compliance regulations or information that's being stored or being offered, or services offering, or product offerings maybe in different countries. So you necessarily not only have to deal with one compliance regulation in the U.S., but really compliance regulations around the world. So while these regulations are governing the information, they need to ensure that these documents can be produced. And also not only the documents, but for example, in e-discovery, metadata is as critical to the documents as the documents in producing for any kind of litigation. So it's really important that you're able to recover the documents that are being managed in Documentum. And a lot of times, or most of the time, these solutions are critical, and the business is really relying on this information to be sure that it's available for the users. Processes are being driven in Documentum, so it's really important that we understand the type of information that's being stored in these systems. It's important to understand what the impact is going to be on the business if they're not able to recover that information, or if that information is not available. What's the impact if a document's not available to a regulator while they're going an audit? Or we had an incident, for example, we had a customer that out of Canada that they had products that the doctors were accessing the on-site repository to be able to look at information about that drug, to look to see if there was any allergies as they were serving that kind of looking at that patient and ready to prescribe that drug. They wanted to ensure that that drug was safe for that patient. So they need to have access, continuous access to those documents. And failure to not have access to that information could potentially mean that that doctor has to go to a competitive product to look to see if those other drugs are safe to prescribe to that information. So it's critical to have that information available, and of course at the core of that is Documentum, ensuring that Documentum, the entire platform, is available and protected, and information is recoverable for the entire platform. So let's take a look at, as we look to build a comprehensive strategy, we need to look at a little bit of what are the incidents that can occur, right, that we need to be aware of in order to really build a better protection strategy for my ECM system, right? And what this chart provides us with is a type of instance, but also the frequency or maybe the probability of when these instances can occur, right? And of course, disasters, which everyone is really aware of, and rightfully so, because these are catastrophic events, right? And they're typically, what ends up happening is you're losing the entire system, and you need to be able to recover potentially the entire system, maybe one of the components. Maybe in that chart that Patrick showed, you may need to be able to just recover the database if you have a database crash, or maybe if you have a storage where the content is being stored, you need to be able to recover that content. But really the biggest challenge in backing up the Documentum repository is, well, how do you keep everything in sync when you do the backup, right? You may have an incident where you lose a file system, but then the challenge comes into, well, where do you actually restore the content to that actually syncs up with the database, right? So we have a product, HOTBackup, and I'll talk about this in more detail. But HOTBackup is a solution that we worked, quite honestly, with EMC, the backup team, to help address this challenge. It helps enable you to do the backup and recovery, do the backup of the Documentum platform in a consistent way. And the nice thing about it is that we're using what you already have in place, the backup systems that you have in place to coordinate and automate this backup process. And I'll talk in more detail about how we're able to do that. The other incidents, the 80%, 70, and then 80, and the other 10 for the end-use deletions, are around not necessarily losing the entire system, but really you're losing a subset of documents and metadata. And in these cases, these issues are related to human error, such as overwriting maybe an existing version of a document, or administrators where the administrator deletes documents, or maybe some custom code that accidentally destroys information, or maybe, how about cyber terrorism, right? That's something that we're hearing more and more often about, how other external sources, countries are trying to access systems, and maybe they delete or remove certain information from the repository, maybe start removing some content, right? So these are types of losses that doesn't really take the entire system offline potentially, but they do have the same catastrophic impact on the business and potentially will require the entire organization to a halt, right? Bring the whole environment to a halt. And recovering from these losses is going to require a lot of resources, right? The Documentum administrator, the business to confirm that everything's going to be recovered correctly, the backup team, right? So it's a very time-consuming process to recover everything back into the system. We also have a product called SmartRecovery, which helps address these types of incidents, right? It helps you recover individual documents or group of documents right back into the repository, content, and metadata, so that you can address these issues. Of course, reducing the data loss to minutes is also key to an organization. So one of the key things that we can also do is we can do these backups, because we're doing backups on a hot basis. Our HOTBackup capability, along with our SmartRecovery capability, can help address and help reduce the data loss to minutes, quite honestly within 15 minutes of the failure in case of a system failure. Now let's take a closer look at, we're going to take a closer look at each one of the products and talk a little bit more about some of the challenges of backing up and recovering some information. And the first slide here that I'm showing is addressing the system failures, right? What are some of the risks of doing an online backup? Because a lot of times what we find is that customers are trying to do an online backup, and what ends up happening is that they kind of look at it and says, well, why can't I do this backup? And what this chart is showing you is that this is a typical backup process that's running on a daily basis. Maybe you're doing a full backup on a weekend. And what ends up happening is that backup is running, and you may have different backup processes running for each of the components of the Documentum system, right? So you have the database, the content, and the full text index being backed up by 3 different technologies. And then what I'm showing here in this little red box is that if you're going to use this backup to do the recovery, this little red area indicates that there's loss, because when you go to do the restore, what's going to happen is you're going to restore the database, but it has no awareness, it has no metadata associated with its content. So although the content is going to reside on the storage system, the users are not going to have access to it. So the end result is some data loss. The second scenario is the reverse, and potentially is more severe, because in this scenario, you're now backing up the database and content, but the database has the pointers, the metadata for the content, but when you go to do the restore, the storage, the the backup for the storage is not going to contain that content. So when your users are going to try to access that information, the content is going to be unavailable. And then recovery from operational incidents is a little bit different, and that's because when you're looking at Documentum and when your Documentum is managing where the content is being stored, it's managing the names of those documents as well. So you have a folder structure, and then you have the names of the file names of that content on the disk storage system. Now, Documentum knows exactly what this document, the name of this document is based on the metadata. But you can't go to your storage system and say, okay, well, I need to find, this information on CYA backup, because when you go to the storage system, all it sees is these components, right? These names that is not aware to the user. So what ends up happening is the only way to recover those information would be, okay, well, maybe I have a backup that I can recover from. Maybe it's of last night, and I can restore my entire system to last night because the information is so critical. But that really implies that you're going to lose all that information. And a lot of times what ends up happening is that information is not available or maybe goes unnoticed, right, that it was lost for days or weeks. So, you may not, your latest backup may not necessarily have those documents that need to be recovered. And then, of course, you always have the ability, maybe if you have a copy of those documents somewhere in an email, or if you're using some kind of capture process, maybe you have your capture solution may still have those documents stored there. But that also means that now your users are going to be impacted, because now what does it take for those users to be able to recreate and reintroduce those documents back into the repository, right? What if it was under a process that maybe you were tracking, when certain things were being approved, right? Maybe Patrick, for example, entered a document to the repository and then went through a review process, and then what ends up happening is that you have audit trails that have all those audit trails in place to kind of show traceability of when things were approved and reviewed. Well, that means that those are all gone. So you have to go through a whole review process, and if you're dealing with compliance, that's no longer compliant because you no longer have all the original context of those documents. And of course, downtime, right? Poor customer sat. Let's go back to the fact that you're dealing with global information in users, and if you have to do a restore, that means that that whole system is unavailable while that restore process is occurring. Now, there's a lot of technology deployed within an organization. There's a lot of times Documentum is only one system in a whole host of systems in the data center that the backup team is providing the backup system. But they do have a lot of robust technology out there to protect Documentum and protect everything that's in that data center, right? They may have, for example, because you're dealing with high availability, you're potentially looking at, oops, I apologize for that. I went a little forward here. So you may have a scenario here where you're potentially replicating, information from one system to another because you have to have availability. But either HA doesn't provide any kind of protection. Clustering, for example, is going to replicate things. I'm sorry, replication is going to replicate documents, content, metadata potentially from one system to the other. But what's up happening with replication is that it's whatever happens on your source is going to also happen on your target. So any corruption or loss on your primary is going to get replicated to your secondary system as well. So replication, while it's good for disaster recovery purposes, is not necessarily a replacement for a good backup and recovery strategy. The other thing is you may have backups in place, backup systems. Again, it's an all-or-nothing approach, and you still have consistency issues as well. How do you maintain consistency of the database, the content, and the full-text index server? So although there's a lot of host of technology out there, they're not application aware. They're not addressing those challenges that I really described in the previous slide. That really what comes into the CYA solutions, and as I mentioned, we have two solutions that I'm going to talk about more specifically about how we can help maintain or help address these challenges. The first one I'm going to talk in more detail about is CYA HOTBackup, and the nice thing about this solution is that it does complement your existing backup solution, so we're not going to replace what you have in place, but what we're going to do is we're going to enable you to do a hot backup of the three components of the Documentum system maintaining the synchronization of it, so that when you go to do the restore, you're going to ensure that you're not, for example, going to introduce corruption into the repository and have users trying to access information that they can't. The second thing is going to be, well, how do you recover individual objects, right? Documents, and that's our SmartRecovery application, where we're going to be able to enable the administrator, a single administrator, if they have an incident where they want to recover a group of documents, thousands or hundreds, or a single document, specific version of a document, we're going to help recover those right back into the repository while the repository is online. In addition to that, we have something called time-based recovery that's part of SmartRecovery, because one of the things that we're doing is we're doing frequent incremental backups of these objects. So as a result of doing these frequent incremental backups, as often as every 15 minutes, we're going to enable you to also improve service levels, meaning that we're going to enable you to recover information, reduce that information loss to minutes. Right? So now let's talk a little bit about each one of these products and how it works and how it is going to help meet some of these challenges. So the first one is our CYA HOTBackup process, which is going to enable you to do that HOTBackup job, right? Do those HOTBackups, not take Documentum offline. And the first thing that we're going to do is there's a HOTBackup server, which is a very light web-based application. It's just a web Tomcat application. It manages and coordinates your backup processes. So your nightly backups will be scheduled through CYA HOTBackup. And one of the things that we'll focus on here is that the fact that we still have the backup clients on each of the servers that's hosting Documentum. So the content server, for example, will have a client. The full text index server will have a HOTBackup client, and the storage area where the content server will have a HOTBackup client as well. But the nice thing about it is that we're going to leverage the backup applications that you already have. So we support IBM TSM, EMC Networker, Semantic Net Backup, as well as Avamar from EMC, but also the various applications that you may have, for example, the database, RMAN, the backup agents from the backup software, a host different. We want to try to make this as unintrusive as possible to the backup team, to the DBAs, but still provide a way to ensure the synchronization of everything that's happening. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to connect to the content server and suspend several maintenance jobs, the clean and file scan from running, so that way there's no changes occurring in terms of deletions or removal of that information. Once that is complete, we then move on to the Explorer server. We're going to integrate with the Explorer native backup capabilities and do a disk backup, and then once this backup is complete, we integrate with your backup software to store those backup files, so you have those available for restore if needed. Once that's complete, we then move on to the database server, and again here we can integrate with the database agents from the backup software, or your database administrator may have scripts that they want to use to back up the database. So in those scenarios, we can leverage those database scripts directly within the application, and we'll execute those database scripts, ensuring the consistency of it. And then lastly is we'll move to, once the database backup is complete, we will then move over to the content server, and we'll start backing up the content. Now, one of the nice things about this process is, in terms of the content, is instead of traversing the entire folder structure with your traditional backup system, because a lot of times these files may be small and your backup system may take a long time to identify all the content that needs to be backed up. So what we do is we leverage our integration with Documentum and our awareness of Documentum. And what we do is we identify all the information that needs to be backed up since the last backup, and then we tell the backup application, say, backup only these content files. So that's how we know that these backup files need to be backed up through the Documentum APIs, and that means that now the performance is going to be much faster because it doesn't have to traverse all the file system to identify the content files that need to be backed up. So as a result, the HOTBackup system, following this process, we're going to ensure that the synchronization of the platform, right, the repository is intact. You're not going to necessarily run into a scenario now where you have metadata pointing to missing content, because that's really bad, because now it's going to be very difficult to clean up, right? You're going to have to kind of be an object model guru, right, to understand all the different relationships in order to determine what needs to be cleaned up, right? Very time consuming, and that means all those processes and things like that are going to be halted. That's our HOTBackup application. It's going to coordinate, control, and automate your backup process, leveraging what you already have in place. and it's primarily focused on your system level failures. Right? The second product now that I'm going to talk about in more detail is our CUA SmartRecovery application. And specifically, I'm going to talk a little bit about the architecture and how it's able to do its own backup. Keep in mind here that, not to confuse everyone, this backup process is different than what I just described earlier. This backup process is focusing on the individual documents or objects, content and metadata within the Documentum repository, and capturing them on an incremental basis. So as we're doing the backup, the first thing it's going to do is, on a very frequent basis, as often as every 15 minutes, is going to basically connect to Documentum. It gets deployed on the content server, so there's no additional hardware required, but it's going to connect, it's going to identify what's been changed, content and metadata, and capture it in a single pass together, content and all of its related metadata. During this backup process, what we're going to do is also verify the integrity of what we're backing up. So any kind of relationships that are broken, we're going to skip it and move on to the next document. These documents are stored on some kind of storage device. These are just flat files, a copy of the content and the metadata, which we'll refer to as journal files, stored on some kind of storage system. Now, the other options is, if you don't want to store it on a backup system, such as a SAN device or a NAS device, I do want to mention here that this SAN or NAS device can also be, for example, an EMC data domain device. And the data domain device is a very high-performance deduplication storage system, so we can write directly to that storage system as well and leverage some of the deduplication capability as well. That's available as part of that data domain device. And if you're using the data domain device as a back-end system for your backup application for NetBackup or Networker, as an example, you can now leverage some of the deduplication capability of those devices to now only have one copy of the content. The other option is, we also have a module called Extender, and that Extender module will also allow you to stream the content directly from the content server or our application, the SmartRecovery application, directly to NetBackup or IBM TSM. So that means that the only thing that would be stored on the storage device would really be more of the journal files of the metadata, right? So this is our backup process or our architecture for the SmartRecovery solution, right? Now, we also have some additional modules part of the SmartRecovery application. One of them is our data integrity module, which allows you to schedule periodic scans of the information in the repository and ensure referential integrity, right? It's about 250 checks you can turn on, one or various checks on or off, but gives you a report in terms of identifying any kind of inconsistencies in the repository. We also have a records retention module, and what this does is it adheres or aligns with Documentum's retention policy services or any other policy records management capability that you may have deployed to manage the retention of these information stored in Documentum. And the key here is of our retention module is, as Documentum RPS destroys documents from within the repository, you want to ensure that the backup application, SmartRecovery specifically, doesn't contain any of those documents that have been destroyed as part of the RPS process. So as these documents are being destroyed with RPS, this retention module will also destroy the backup files from the content and metadata from the CUA backup files as well. So this way you're ensured that you can recover documents within the retention period, but once the retention period has expired, those documents are also going to be restored from the backup, right? So that way you're not at risk of having to produce information that has already been, you don't have to necessarily keep around anymore. So those are some additional modules that we have as part of SmartRecovery. Now, one of the key things that we talked about is, well, how does SmartRecovery help you recover those objects if you lose, for example, a certain subset of documents? And the way we do is we have a recovery client, a CUA SmartRecovery client, that's very easy to use. It's, you can traverse the cabinet folder structure just like you do, for example, in one of the, whether it's D2 or XCP, one of those clients. And as you can go and as granular as a specific version of document. So I can recover, for example, version 1.0, or I can, for example, recover a whole cabinet folder structure. And when you click on, for example, recover in the recovery client, what it'll do is it'll actually put back the content in metadata right back into the repository as it was before it was lost. So that means content and all of its metadata, creation, modification dates, workflow states, processes, and for example, all be restored exactly as it was before it was lost. So that means for any compliance requirements, you're going to be able to recover very quickly, and you're also going to be ensuring that all the original metadata is going to be intact. right? And the nice thing about this is that both during the backup process as well as the recovery process, so when you're going to do, for example, if I lose a document, I'm restoring it, it's all being done while Documentum is online. So the users are not even impacted at all. The user's just going to know that those documents are right back in the repository. And then we also have other ways to find the information in the recovery client as well. So for example, if you don't want to, or if you're not necessarily filing information, you can go into our application, and you can also query for objects to restore back into the repository based on key attributes or properties from the metadata. This is an example of now using SmartRecovery along with HOTBackup to help do the restore process. So how you would restore content, the whole platform to a certain point in time with our HOTBackup product. So now when you restore the system, you ensure that everything is in a consistent state. You're not necessarily going to have any kind of corruption introduced into the repository. So theoretically, if I had a failure on Tuesday at like 6:15 p.m., I would restore with my recovery application, because HOTBackup is enabling the consistency, but the recovery is still happening with your HOTBackup, with your net backup or network or system or whatever backup application you have in place. But then if you had, this would get you back to 12 a.m., but then you would have some data loss as well, because throughout the day, information was being created or modified. So as a result, with SmartRecovery's time-based recovery capability, we can recover information based on dates, those objects that were backed up on an incremental basis. So that will allow you to roll forward everything from 12 a.m. to the last CYA SmartRecovery incremental backup, reducing the data loss to minutes. I know I'm running short on time here, so I'm just going to go through a little bit of one example here of one of our customers that successfully had SmartRecovery, our CYA products in place, CYA HOTBackup and SmartRecovery in place, but specifically they had a few incidents that they were able to recover with SmartRecovery. One of them is that they were using CAD drawings and the user accidentally overwrote the document. And with SmartRecovery, they were able to easily go select that version of that document and put it right back into the repository. We have capability that says overwrite those documents with backups, and they were able to do that within a few minutes. There was also another incident where they had a corrupted document, and it went unnoticed for like 30 days because they didn't really have a need to access the document. But again, they had SmartRecovery in place. We had a good copy of it. They went to the recovery client, selected it, went right back into the repository. So some of the benefits here in terms of DuPont was that improved productivity, because the user didn't have to recreate that document, right? It was already, we had a copy of it within a few minutes. It was back, right? The administrator didn't have to go in and try to recreate or try to restore the entire system, because they were easily able to go into SmartRecovery and do it. The user, as a result, there was no impact to any of the other users. They also have some compliance requirements in there as well, and all the metadata was recovered as well. The nice thing about it is the applications easy to use, but they also reached out to CYA support team, and our support team was very flexible and helped them to recover that information into the repository. Just a little background on CYA. We are part of InChoice now, but CYA was a standalone company, has been around for over 15 years in the ECM or Documentum space. We've been providing backup and recovery capabilities for Documentum for a very long period of time, with over 2,000 customers worldwide, and providing this backup and recovery capability. And we do support other ECM platforms. So a lot of what I've been talking about in terms of Documentum and some of the challenges is not specific to Documentum. All the ECM systems that offer this robust capability all have a need for some of this CYA backup application. And we also integrate with a lot of the backup and recovery technology, so we do have alliances with a lot of these other backup applications as well. These are just an example of some of our worldwide customers. As you can see here, span multiple industries, multiple countries as well. So now I'm going to turn over back to Cheryl to discuss some of the upcoming events. Cheryl.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you, Patrick, for your presentations today. Before we move into the Q&A portion of our presentation, I just wanted to remind you that the third webinar in our series, Info Archive, What's New and What's Next, What's New and What's Next, is coming up on September 16th. The first in the series, Documentum V2, What's New and What's Next, is now available to view on demand. And to register for the upcoming webinar, or to view the one that we have on demand, visit the resources section at nchoice.com. I wanted to let you know that we are getting close on time, so I'm hoping you'll stick with us for a couple more minutes to do a couple of questions. Now we will begin our Q&A session. And we do have a few good questions here that people have given us. The first one looks like it's for Patrick. And this says, does D2 use UCF to transfer content?
Sure, I'll take that. The D2 application is built off of Documentum APIs, the DFC and up. It has a number of different ways of interacting with document as far as content. One is the standard or the historic content transfer mechanism, codenamed UCF, and it can rely on that. It'll automatically use branch office caching for distributed capabilities. Actually, in 4.5, the recent release of D2, they have done quite a bit of work to make that D2 and branch office cache performance through UCF much more faster. They also have a number of ways of downloading content directly through the D2 application, so you don't need that extra component, and it's much more browser experience based. You can download it to the browser. You do lose a little bit of functionality about automatically finding content when you go to check it back in, but otherwise it's there. So there's a number of options. UCF is one.
Thank you, Patrick. Okay, the next one I have is for Mike. It says here, you had mentioned that your backup job can run as frequently as every 15 minutes. Is this the minimal amount of data loss that can be achieved with SmartRecovery?
That's what we find as a typical data in terms of RPO, and some of it will require us to work with you, understand a little bit about your object model, a little bit about your transactional rate. There are things that we can configure in the application in terms, for example, the number of backup jobs that we can configure. So it could be a little bit less, and we can, if you have specific questions, or we can work with you on determining if we can get that down to even further. But I guess the short answer is we can potentially, yes, we can probably get it lower.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I've got another one for Patrick here. It says, I'm an existing Documentum customer. How hard is it to upgrade to this new version and get the new features?
Sure. So as part of our investment themes, really the manageability of Documentum is forefront. So we have a number of different orchestration tools that we provide with Documentum that may help facilitate new rollouts of Documentum 7, plus upgrading to subsequent versions from 7.0 all the way up. I think one of the big things to understand when you're upgrading is that there's a choice, right? You can upgrade, you can stay on some extensive support. If what's working for you is great, you have to balance out the features you have now with the features you're going to get. You have to balance the cost of staying on and paying maybe some extensive support or relying on older technologies in production versus upgrading not only Documentum, but the infrastructure like the database, the operating systems, the hardware, the virtualized systems, whatever it is. So there's a number of factors there. Dates and times and downtime come into play. So planning, I think, is I definitely see the most successful upgrades taking planning very seriously and not just downloading a product and hitting install. It's an enterprise system, so lots of thought has to be going into all the different moving pieces. But otherwise, we have in Documentum 7 decoupled the client and server. We see a lot of customers upgrading their clients first. They can get to a client that sort of straddles between the version of Documentum platform they have versus the latest one they want to get to. That allows them to do the testing of their solution with the new client. And then later on, they can swap out the platform overnight, on a weekend, maybe a couple weekends, depending on the size of the system. But the end user really sees no change. The IT group doesn't have to update everything all at the same time. So planning ahead, making sure your systems are upgraded as they should be according to your deployment is something that we definitely have been working on and see a lot of success in.
Thank you, Patrick. Okay, I've got one more for Mike. We've got a question from the audience. It says, is there any performance resources hit due to client running on Documentum server for CYA backup?
No, there's not. The SmartRecovery gets installed on the content server, and because it's the jobs where the backups are always incremental, it's very low utilization on the system, and we pretty much see a one-to-one in terms of every time the backup job is running, it's equivalent to one additional user on the system. So unnoticeable during the backup process, and even during the recovery process. Again, the users don't even realize that the recovery process is running because Documentum is always online, and there's no really resource intensive processes running.
Very good. Thank you, Mike, and thank you again, Patrick. That's all the time we have for questions today. If you'd like more information on anything that was discussed today or want to share your thoughts on future webinars, please email us at cya@nchoice.com or call us at the number we've provided on the screen. If you want more information on the Documentum platform, you can chat with EMC Sales and Support at the URL shown. I also wanted to let you know that hours, we're going to be sending you an email that contains a link to the recorded version of the presentation. I just want to say thank you again for joining us, and have a great day.